Good morning. The March 1st Board of Education meeting is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All those in favor? Motion passes 700. Item 2.04 is establish agenda order, and the agenda will stand as published. Item 2.05 is recognitions, and we wanted to spend this morning recognizing our colleague and friend, Dr. Tom Frank. And it is unfortunate that he wasn't able to be with us today, but I did want to share a collage that we've put together to give to him when he's able to meet with us. Under here. Sharing all of his time and service with the board. Thank you. Dr. Frank has been a long-term advocate for our public schools, and we're going to miss him a lot. Mrs. Hummer.
And I just want to say one of the biggest issues that's always been very close to Dr. Frank's heart was our graduation rates. And I think it was kind of fitting at the end of his time on the board that we very shortly around there we received our graduation rates, which were record rates for graduations in our high schools. And I know that he takes great pride in that. So I thought that was kind of a fitting ending for him.
All right, well, item 2.06 is Educator of the Month, Mrs. Hummer.
March is the month we celebrate literacy in America, and we do so by honoring the birthday and the timeless writings of Theodore Geisel, otherwise known as Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss would have been more than 100 years old last month, and actually I think today is his actual birthday. And his legacy lives on in the phrase, "Read across America." Therefore, the Board of Education finds it only fitting to honor an educator who dedicates her career to the reading curriculum in our school system, namely Lily Demestajas, Reading Teacher Specialist at Pasadena Elementary School. Lily has been an asset to AACPS for more than 3 decades. She consistently demonstrates her commitment to increase student achievement through interdisciplinary quality instruction, strategy-focused meetings, professional development, mentoring, coaching, and literacy activities. She creatively helps staff unlock the potential in each child, supporting the county and school literacy initiatives, and enables struggling learners to make connections in a failure-free environment. Ms. D constantly seeks ways to close the achievement gaps in literacy, evidenced by her well-planned lessons and school-wide professional development. She created a school literary magazine to guide student editors and writers through the publishing process. She organizes Read Across America activities and seeks community partners to share a love of literature with students. Lily helps students to express themselves creatively through writing small moments, making connections between the written and spoken word. Lily provides professional development for reading interventions to other teachers. Her enthusiasm and dedication to literacy ensure other schools are provided foundations and tools to implement some of the reading interventions with fidelity. Beyond the school day, she hosts parent involvement opportunities to engage students in Common Core curriculum standards, literacy, and assessments. Through Ms. D's professional development, she is making an impact on students' educational experiences and helping move Pasadena Elementary forward on the continuum of academic progress. Pasadena Elementary is a caring community, fostering high standards supporting the whole child, academically, socially, and physically, and Lily's efforts support this vision. The school was recently recognized as a 2016 National Blue Ribbon School, and her creativity and approach to elevate all students has certainly contributed to this success. Lily Domestahas, you have an excellent rapport with students and staff, and your strategies and positive learning environment ensure students remain engaged and motivated to learn. Your colleagues consider you a valuable resource and mentor, and the entire Pasadena elementary community cherishes your enthusiasm, passion, expertise, and constant support. Congratulations on being selected Educator of the Month for March 2017. Please come up front.
I would have dressed a little bit more appropriately if I had known.
Well, I take it we surprised you.
Yes. Yes. And then my family, yes.
Well, how did they get you here this morning?
We were coming to a board meeting, which honestly I was trying to get out of because I had some work to do. Sorry,
You didn't
Dr.
want to come
Arlotta.
spend the morning with us?
Well, I didn't know the agenda, so I kept saying to Jen, I got this. Yeah.
Who else here?
When the teachers came in and our secretary said, oh, I didn't know you were coming. I'm texting them, why are you here? What's going on? And they're evading it. And then my family, my husband, my mom, my daughters, my son-in-law. Thank you.
Oh, Bliss. Well, wonderful. We have a bell so you can get everyone's attention now. It does work. It does work. And there you go. And so,
Thank you so much.
oh, we're
Very
thrilled.
surprised.
Oh, I love that you're so excited.
I'm surprised. Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Item 2.07 is Employee of the Month, and our Employee of the Month pulled a surprise on us and didn't come to work today. So we are, we'll try to do this again in April. 2.08 is Volunteer of the Month, Mrs. Sasso.
The AACP Facilities Division is responsible for the planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operation of AACP's 126 schools. Renovating old schools, constructing new ones, upgrading aging mechanical and electrical system, replacing roofs are some of the backstage operations that provide safe and comfortable learning environments for the amazing AACPS teachers, staff, and children of Anne Arundel County. Outside consultants and other contracted professionals work alongside our talented facilities division staff. But one of those professionals is no longer a contractor. Instead, he opts to give back to the school system by volunteering his priceless expertise honed by a long professional career. Today, the Board of Education is pleased to recognize Mr. Steve Hudson with the March 2017 Volunteer of the Month Award. Steve is a retired mechanical engineer who spent his entire 47-year career at the James Posey Associates engineering firm, where he designed heating and cooling systems for K-12 schools. In 1966, he worked as a draftsman to design the new Southern High School, and later advanced to mechanical designer, engineer, project manager, and finally served as company president. In all, Steve completed over 300 school-related projects and eventually supervised renovations of the same schools he originally designed 30 or 40 years earlier. Since his 2013 retirement, Steve Hudson has devoted his Fridays to volunteering in the Calvert County Public School Facilities Office, and on Monday, he serves AACPS. According to Director of Facilities Lisa Seaman Crawford, Steve's wide-ranging expertise and tenacity to solve problems is invaluable to the design and construction offices, as well as the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing shops. His typical Monday may start by reviewing design drawings to ensure they meet standards. Then he may be suddenly pulled to help inspect a school's new boiler, installation or to puzzle over a malfunctioning chiller. And Steve always ends his AACPS Monday with a promise, whether it's to review the drawing tucked under his arm or to investigate energy codes. He'll have it ready for our team next week. Mr. Siemens Crawford speaks for the entire division when she writes, "Behind Steve's quiet professionalism and humble demeanor lies a fierce, intelligent, and deep passion for precise design, best engineering practices, and exacting diagnosis. He freely shares his hand-earned knowledge with the entire facility staff to ensure the AACPS schools building are the best they can be. This generosity of spirit, time, and knowledge makes Steve one of the most effective teachers in the school system." Mr. Steve Hudson, would you please come forward? With appreciation, I present this Volunteer of the Month certificate and belt to you. How did they get you here?
Well, they told me it was going to be a meeting. I had to talk about some standards I've been working with the county. That's Alex Trickney.
Okay. And which family and friends are here on your behalf?
Several of the people that I worked with at the James Posey Associates. One of my partners at the time, and some of the new people.
Well, thank you very much for your service. And with this bell and this certificate, we basically make you an official member of the Bell crew, which we have.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll get pictures of the Educator and Volunteer of the Month at our break shortly. Item 2.09 is School and Community Highlights. Mrs. Nally.
I had the pleasure of attending with many other board members the Benfield Elementary ribbon cutting. I want to congratulate my good friend and principal Debbie Short, who did such a wonderful job organizing the event. And what a special day it was, seeing that school opening and seeing the excitement and the kids singing, and it was wonderful. And I do want to say that our own Terry Gilliland attended with his young 14-month-old daughter, and she was absolutely perfect. She was mesmerized throughout the entire ceremony. I tell you, I was so impressed with her and those big blue eyes, and she followed everything. She didn't miss a trick. So that was wonderful. And on Saturday, I attended at South River High School. I attended with my grandson and hundreds of other children the Destination Imagination competitions. And you know, it was wonderful to see the kids involved in this creative activity, but also amazing to see the number of adult volunteers there. I just want to commend all of those volunteers. I know from my grandson's experience how many hours, Saturdays and after schools and time was devoted to this. So I just want to commend all the volunteers for Destination Imagination, and it was just a fun, wonderful event for our children. Thank you.
Mrs. Hummer.
Yes, I'll echo what Ms. Nally said. Benfield Elementary is just gorgeous. It's beautiful. I had the pleasure of attending the Glen Burnie Cluster Band concert last Friday night, and by all accounts, for those who've been there before, it was the largest one they've ever had, and it was a packed house, and it was great to see our elementary, middle, and high school students all perform together. So I've been able to attend 2 of the cluster band concerts, and they were both wonderful, and it's great to see the pipeline of students we have pursuing music. I also attended the Meade Old Mill County Championship basketball game, and I'm a little biased toward Meade, and they lost by 3 points, so good job, Old Mill. But now they're the county champs, but both teams have gone on to both won their first round games for the states last night. And so for all our teams moving on through states, good luck to everybody.
And I'll just add that Dr. Arlato and I had the chance to see Bob Mosier's daughter dance in the AACPS Dance Festival last Friday night, along with about 2 hours worth of amazing dancers from all different schools all over the county. The talent that we have in Anne Arundel is beyond belief. And then last night, the board got together to have a strategic planning workshop. I know that the Publics had an opportunity to do that up, where were they first?
We were in North County.
North County. So we have a couple more opportunities if you haven't had the chance to weigh in on kind of what you see as the future of AACPS. So please do. Item 2.10 is the PTA report. I don't think we have a PTA report. Okay. Then we will take a short break for photos and come back for public comment. We'll move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during the public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to the board assistant. I have one card today, Lisa Van Buskart.
Good morning, board and Dr. Arlato. I didn't want to be here today, but given what happened at the board, the budget meeting 2 weeks ago, I have to be here. So I persist in reminding you of the harm you are willfully inflicting upon high school students every single day by your failure to act. Thank you, Mrs. Sasso, for your amendment 2 weeks ago and for your leadership on healthy and safe school hours. I cannot express to the rest of you how disappointed I was that nobody was willing to second the motion. It was incredibly ironic to me that in some of the other discussions, even when they were defeated 1-7 or 1-8, that were seconded, that you would lecture each other about you need to ask for what makes a school system good, but you weren't willing to even discuss start times. I can only contrast it with Howard County, who last week voted 6-2 to have their start committee go back and offer up new solutions so that no school starts before 8 and all schools start before 9:25. The parameters are very similar to what Ms. Sassa proposed, with her proposal that no bus pickup before 7:30 and complete evening drop-offs by 4:30. With your failure to second the proposal, this board missed the opportunity to discuss and set those parameters, which Start School Later has been asking you to do for a couple of years. You also missed the opportunity to lay out a plan of deadlines and project milestones for AACPS. October 2017 to see some software-generated options, decisions soon after that, and then under Ms. Sasso's proposal to move the money around as appropriate. You could still have this discussion perhaps later this month when Dr. Arlato is presenting on what will happen with the late releases per your September 21st vote. So what more can the public do if none of you are willing to take on the mantle of leadership? On the subject of leadership, when I attended the Air War College 4 years ago, I started an article written by Stephen Coleman of the Australian Defence Force Academy. In The Problem of Duty and Loyalty, he writes, "A test of integrity is a situation where it's reasonably obvious, or even perfectly obvious, what the right thing to do is, but for whatever reason, it's difficult for the person involved to actually do the right thing." So I think 2 weeks ago's amendment was a test of integrity for some of you not to second it. A different article from the same leadership course defined moral courage as a willingness to stand up for what one believes is right, even if the stand is unpopular. So if you can't be leaders, then at least be followers, and I hope that at a minimum you will attend the I'm meeting with Dr. Hagani this afternoon to discuss transportation routing software, so you can follow the example Howard County is setting in the state on transportation issues. I also hope you'll attend the national conference in April in DC, Adolescent Sleep, Health, and School Start Times. There'll be all the experts that Start School Later has cited for years will be there to present from the first day, and on the second day, experts from around the country who have successfully implemented change. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Okay. We'll move on to consent items. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to bundle 4.01 through 4.14 and move them from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the Board of Education approve contracts as listed on today's agenda, 4.01 through 4.14, inclusive.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Hummer.
So last meeting, we approved a large number of contracts for High Point, and this month's from Manorview. So I take it that means that all of these are in process now that the contracts are going, they'll be started?
For the record, Alex Shackno, Chief Operating Officer. Remember that the state of Maryland participates in the public school construction process. So with this board's approval, we will put the contracts forward to the state. Once we get their concurrence, we'll be able to execute the contracts fully. But yes, our intention is that this puts all of these projects on the road going forward. It's about $19 million worth of contracts today for Manorview, and we still have the contracts for site work, concrete, and food service equipment that will likely come to you at your mid-month March meeting.
And so when do we, given the state, when do we anticipate that these will begin? I mean,
We'll be underway here probably within 2 months or so.
great. Thank you.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Item 5.01 is administrative personnel appointments. We do not have any today. Item 5.02, personnel. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the board approve actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
So moved.
All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Item 5.03, the superintendent's recommendation on redistricting Annapolis High School feeder system. This is an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I'm recommending that the board approve the recommendation of the redistricting committee as amended, as amended by the superintendent and forwarded at the last board meeting.
So moved.
Do we have any board questions or comments? Do we have any public comment on this item? Mrs. Birch.
I just have one question. There was some concern that I received after our meeting about the redistricting of the middle school that, and I know you'd given us a little bit of information about it, that there may be some moving too many minorities to Annapolis Middle School and keep having that a little bit out of balance. Are there any other options for an element? I mean, is there any other way to move some students to Annapolis and out of Bates that wouldn't get it so out of balance? Or did you not think it was that bad?
Well, let me start with, and
I guess
certainly the
that's the
team
first
can chime
question.
in. They've had the boots on the ground with the committee. So the committee, so there were the recommendations of the elementary schools,
Right.
as you're aware of, and I think what you're referring to is then the second part of the recommendation was the feeder system to the middle schools.
Correct.
And part of the recommendation that the committee made, and it was unanimous, was that Mills Parole
Correct.
would now, those students would now matriculate into Annapolis Middle.
Right.
And the Germantown students would continue to matriculate into Bates. There has been some recent conversation, I think is what you're referring to, please correct me if I'm wrong, with the possibility of the Germantown students going to Annapolis Middle and the Mills Parole students going to Bates. There's been some recent conversation. what you have before you, what was presented to you and you have before you, recommendation to go to public hearing was unanimously approved by the committee. We've talked about it as a team and think that it's in the best interest to not, we'll have to do some, if we were to do that switch, we would literally be running, for instance, and there are several issues around this, but in terms of transportation, we'd be literally running buses past the Germantown students, past Bates to get to Annapolis Middle
Right.
School. And so we would have to be doing some reconfiguring of the buses, and they'd literally be passing one school to get to the other. And so we think the feeder pattern makes sense, and what was recommended by the committee, we think that feeder pattern makes sense.
And there isn't concern about the demographic makeup?
The demographic makeup will change. I don't believe it will change drastically. I've seen the data, you have seen the data. I don't believe it will change drastically, but it in fact will change, yes.
Okay.
We will have an increase in some areas and a decrease in other areas of student groups. Let me be more specific, in student groups.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Hummer?
And actually, the demographics that we have now are going to be subject to change in the, not so much for the middle school, but coming up with Annapolis Monarch, Annapolis opening, that's going to change the demographics at some of our schools, could change some of the demographics at our schools as well, based on enrollment and things like that. So things could shift.
If there's a high likelihood with upwards of almost 600, let's say somewhere about 580 to 590 students moving out of the Annapolis elementary schools into the new Monarch contract school, we will certainly see a change in some way, shape, or form in those student demographics, in those student groups, yes. But they are not part of the data that you have in front of you
Right.
now, because we don't have those final numbers of the students that will matriculate into the new contract school.
Thank you.
And Bates and Annapolis Middle are both magnet schools, correct?
Correct.
So we can't really ever predict the demographics of those schools because parents have choice.
Great, absolutely they do. And those are magnet schools, so they are drawing not only from the Annapolis cluster, but they're drawing from the entire county.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Lotto.
Mhm.
Also, looking at Tyler Heights and the redistricting, because it looks like, from what it is now, Hispanics, to what it is going to be, I mean, it's just a lot more of Hispanics, but it is my understanding the Monarch system is picking up a lot of the Hispanics from Tyler.
Again, we don't, yes ma'am, so we don't have the numbers right now. With the number of students that have applied to go to Monarch, we may very well see an increase in the concentration of Hispanic students at Tyler, based on the redistricting and the movement of students. So there could be a higher concentration at Tyler, yes ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comment? All right, all those in favor of taking the superintendent's, or the committee's recommendation that the superintendent has amended to a public hearing? Motion passes 7-0-0. That public hearing will be on Monday, April 3rd at 6 p.m. at Annapolis High School, and sign-ups will begin at 5 p.m. The next items on the agenda, we have two policies up for revision. These are second readings. Item 5.04, tutoring for pay, policy GBO.
Good morning. For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel. We have tutoring for pay at GBO on second reading, and we received some public comments on this proposed policy change.
And what did the public have to say?
We had 3 comments. A couple of individuals, 2 of the comments related to the new language that would that indicates that a teacher should avoid any conflicts of interest when tutoring for pay students. Currently, our current policy indicates that a teacher or school employee may not tutor for pay any students at their school. And then we also wanted to clarify that in any instances of tutoring for pay, that there should be no conflicts of interest. So some individuals thought that was unnecessary. And then one comment preferred just keeping that educators should avoid any conflicts of interest and removing the existing language that indicates no teacher or school employee may tutor for pay a student in their school.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you, Madam President, and I apologize. I think I actually stepped out of the room when this came up on first reader, and I did not have a chance to ask the question. And I do not have any affiliation with Sylvan Learning. I have not been affiliated with them since, I want to say 2010 or 2011. But I do know the way they're, you know, if I'm speaking of Sylvan, I'm sure this applies to Huntington and perhaps some of the other competitors in that area. Oftentimes, if a parent opts to have tutoring, paid tutoring service through one of those companies for their child, the franchise owner, if it's a franchise, or the center director, or equivalent, if it's a corporate-owned site, would have the discussion and the negotiation conversation with parents. And the teacher, if it's a course that's being taught, or a tutor, if it's something that's being tutored, would have the interaction with the student. And oftentimes, the teachers and tutors, and I can only speak for Sylvan, do not know who they're going to be teaching. And in a case like this, you know, we could have an Algebra 2 teacher, for instance, who's working part-time at Sylvan, and it could conceivably be one of their students that's coming in that they may not know about in advance. And so my question, and again, forgive my lengthy prelude, but my question is, would that teacher then be adversely impacted if they were to have interaction with that student?
My read of the current language in our policy would be that the teacher would be prohibited from tutoring for pay that student or those students.
So if the teacher has a part-time job and they have no control over the students they're assigned, they would then be in violation of this policy.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mrs. Birch?
I think they would just have to tell their employer, I teach at Annapolis High School, so please don't assign me any students who go to Annapolis High School.
In short, that's what we would ask the
And-
teachers to do.
and
I don't want to preclude the teacher from taking on that additional work and that additional pay with Sylvan or even when they do it privately and independently. We have many teachers that do that tutoring. But we would ask, and will continue to ask, that they are not teaching students that they're responsible for or within their school.
Right, and then in terms of more specified conflicts of interest, you wouldn't know until, I mean, they would be so specific that you wouldn't know until that came up anyway. But I think that's how it works on the tutor list, too. They all advertise as to what school they teach at, so you know that you're not supposed to call someone who teaches at your child's school. You're supposed to call someone who teaches at a different school.
Great, and so thank you for that. And I appreciate the, I think what the intent of this policy is, and clearly I think that line should be drawn, but I think there's just some unintended consequences. I'm sure this policy has the votes to pass, you know, and I'm not going to make an issue of it, but I cannot support this policy, so I will vote against it. So thank you.
Mrs. Sasso?
I just have a question. Is Maryland a right-to-work state? Because that would violate the law if they take a part-time job and they are basically can say, you know, I did not know what the student was going to be. I have a right to work. So can that be checked as to the legality?
Sure, I'd be happy to follow up and just confirm that we are in compliance, you know, with state law, which we had previously done, but I will certainly look into that particular issue.
Thank you, Terry, because that makes a big difference.
Mrs. Hummer?
But I don't think we're not telling them they can't work. We're just saying specific students. And so if you would inform your employer ahead of time, your Sylvan or someone, and say, I can't tutor children from this. So it's not stopping them from working. It's just narrowing who they can work with.
But what if that's the only person that comes for algebra at that moment? And
Then-
they need the part-time job. You know, I'm just want to look at it as the legality. You know, can
Right.
we really stop them? You know, because it's not that they took a student from their classroom and was trying to do it. They went to another job. That's their second job. And we are basically prohibiting. You know, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying, what is the legality of the problem?
Right.
At this
And
point-
understand that in part, we're trying to protect the teacher.
Yes.
Right? I want to
Yes.
protect the teacher, that they are not, because they would be within a school or a department using, Mr. Gillen used the algebra teacher as an example. They would be privy to tests and quizzes that the algebra team had put together. And we don't want to, I want to protect the student first and foremost, but I also want to make sure that we're protecting the teacher, that there can't be any conflicts of interest down the road, or they could be accused of something. It could very well be that in a rating down the road, that a score from the school and school quality and assessments could be part of a teacher's rating, as that is being developed through ESSA and the state and the accountability system, and that could, again, there could be a conflict of interest in their rating. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm using that as an example, Ms. Sasso, but that is certainly something on the table that's being talked about at the state level as part of the accountability system, and we want to make sure that we're protecting the teacher in that.
And I agree, we just basically have two sides to look at, and I agree with, what is being said from both sides. I just want to know the legality. Can we stand for what we want?
And just for clarification, that language in particular that's not being changed, that's been our existing policy.
Mm-hmm.
And this will come back to us next time,
Yes,
March 15th?
Yes, on March 15th, I will provide, it'll come to third reading, and I will also provide the board information
Yeah,
addressing Ms. Sasso's
Thank you.
questions prior to that.
Is there any public comment on this item? All right, item 5.05, second reading, policy KI, procedures for responding to Maryland Public Records request.
So policy KI is also on second reading. We did not receive any public comments on this one.
Is there any public comment today? All right, we will bring that back on the 15th as well.
Yes, correct.
Item 5.06, items of legislation. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, we now have an action item, and we'll go through the legislation. You need a vote.
Okay, yes, we have lots of legislation this week. The first bills are House Bill 197, Senate Bill 485, Education Remote Classroom Technology Grant Program Establishment, Payton's Law. The grant established under these bills would allow homebound students greater opportunity to participate and interact with classmates and teachers, as they would provide for a telepresence through a robot with a microphone and camera to provide homebound students the opportunity for full engagement with classroom instruction. The funding would allow Anne Arundel County Public Schools to expand the options made available to these students so that they can continue their academic studies at an appropriate pace. And we recommend that the board support these bills.
Second.
Mrs. Birch?
So I know we already have some of the equipment to do this. Do you know how many of these
Cameras?
systems we have?
I think the number is 7.
That's
we
great.
We started off with 1, and then we were able to purchase a couple more, and I think just recently we purchased yet another. I think the number is 7. It could be 8.
And are they all in use right now? That's wonderful. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
The next bill's House
We
Bill
have to
4.
vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any public comment? All right, all those in favor? All right, motion passes 7-0-0.
Okay. The next bill's House Bill 458, Senate Bill 604, Visual Impairments, Requirements for Teacher Training, Student Screening, and Maryland Medical Assistance Program Coverage. This bill would essentially require the Professional Standards and Teacher Education Board to require a certificate holder applying for renewal of a certificate as a teacher to complete a course on understanding and recognizing the symptoms of visual impairments. It would require the board to approve a course that meets criteria regarding computerized screening to detect possible symptoms of visual impairments, and it would require the board to adopt regulations and require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to provide each local health department with equipment for the screenings. Anne Arundel County Public Schools has several concerns with these bills, most notably that teacher certification requirements would be mandated or dictated by state law. AACPS also opposes any definition of handicapping conditions that exceeds what is stipulated under federal law, as well as requiring a computerized screening for visual impairments to each student with an IEP, regardless of any suspected difficulty with that student's vision. We feel that such requirements would result in the loss of instructional time for students with disabilities in order to complete these unnecessary assessments, and we therefore recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing the bill? Motion passes 700.
The next bill is House Bill 692 and Senate Bill 334, Education School Emergency Air Conditioning Fund established. These bills would create a new category of the Capital Improvement Program, CIP funding, and require the inclusion of this new category, air conditioning fund, in the state capital budget. We have concerns that the $7.5 million in required funding under these bills would come at the expense of and displace other more traditional CIP projects. Air conditioning is already a permissible project type under the IAC procedures, so it does not need a carve-out of its own. Given that Anne Arundel County Public Schools does not have Category 1 projects and only a limited number of Category 2 projects, it is unlikely that we would be the beneficiary of any, let alone significant amounts of this funding. It is more likely that we would have projects displaced, and we anticipate a loss of anywhere from $750,000 to $825,000 in CIP support for AACPS. And we recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing the bill? Motion passes 700.
The next bill is House Bill 695 and Senate Bill 930, Anne Arundel County Property Tax, Payment in lieu of Taxes Agreements, Economic Development Projects. These bills would provide for a payment in lieu of taxes agreements for economic development projects in the county, including the construction of a conference center by the Maryland Live Casino. We feel that these bills would foster a more robust economic development environment within Anne Arundel County and encourage resulting economic development projects to provide or support an extraordinary and quantifiable service to the public sector, inclusive of schools. AACPS recommends that the bills be amended to clarify that the language referring to the public benefit of the pilot programs includes the benefit of public schools in lieu of simply the benefit of schools. A large part of the benefit of this project to AACPS would be the ability to utilize the proposed conference center for high school graduations and other select activities. We recommend that the board support these bills with the proposed amendment.
Is there any public comment? Mrs. Sasso?
Can I ask what are the amendments that we are proposing? Are these the amendments that we are proposing?
So the amendment that we propose is that the current language enumerates the benefits of such a pilot program, and part of the language states benefit of schools, that this is in the benefit of schools. So we are asking that that be amended to say the benefit of public schools.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 6-1.
The next bill, House Bill 708, State Department of Education Lacrosse Opportunities Program, Youth Lacrosse Nonprofit Organizations. This bill would authorize a youth lacrosse nonprofit organization to submit an application for a grant under the Lacrosse Opportunities Program. It would require the state superintendent of schools or the superintendent's designee to provide grants to eligible youth lacrosse nonprofit organizations with programs that will increase opportunities for minority students to participate in lacrosse. We feel that this program aids to provide communities with access to safe and appropriate recreation and increase youth league athletic opportunities for children. We recommend that the board support this legislation.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting the bill? Motion passes 700.
The next bill, House Bill 786, Education and Individualized Counseling Services Requirements. This bill would authorize school-based personnel to recommend a student to a school guidance counselor or a counseling program to determine whether the student needs a behavioral health assessment. If the school staff makes such a recommendation, the bill then triggers several requirements, such as requiring a school guidance counselor or counseling program to obtain permission to assist the identified student in obtaining a behavioral health assessment. It would require a guidance counselor or a counseling program to obtain permission from the parent or guardian of a student to arrange these services. And it would require a public school to provide space in the public school building for a student to meet with a counselor to receive these individualized counseling services. While we recognize that students with mental health needs require counseling support in order to be successful in school, it is not the role of the school counselors to serve as a referral agent for arranging that these students receive services from outside providers. Rather, the employees should be discussing the students' mental health needs with parents and other student support services staff in the school or school system and providing referrals when needed. When it is appropriate, student services personnel provide mental health services to students in the school on a short-term basis. We also feel that reoccurring mental health appointments during the school day would not only be disruptive to the student learning, but also to the school counselor's workday, as they would have to find time to make all of these logistical arrangements. Therefore, we recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
So moved. Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing the legislation? Motion passes 700.
The next bills, House Bill 975 and Senate Bill 370, Digital Equity for All Maryland Students Act of 2017. These bills establish the School Broadband Upgrade Grant Program and provides that the purpose of the program is to provide state and local funding for special construction to leverage federal funds for Category 1 and Category 2 services that are available through the federal E-rate program to install or upgrade internet access in every public school in the state. This program would be administered by MSDE. While Anne Arundel County Public Schools would not take advantage of the Category 1 broadband internet services, such as broadband infrastructure upgrades, there is a possibility that AACPS could utilize the Category 2 related equipment, such as routers, switches, and wireless access points, through the funding made available under this proposed grant program. The above referenced equipment is expensive, and efforts to reduce our portion of the cost to purchase these items would have a positive impact on the school system. We recommend that the board support this legislation.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting the bill? Motion passes 700.
The next bill, House Bill 1130, Education Pre-Kindergarten Programs Online Registration. This bill would require county boards of education to allow parents and guardians to register their children for publicly funded pre-kindergarten programs in person or online. We feel that this bill would create a barrier for families who do not have access to technology and provide an unfair advantage to families with access to technology. The purpose of the pre-K program is to provide first priority to economically disadvantaged students. However, if the slots are not filled by these economically disadvantaged students, they are then made available to other students who may have had an unfair advantage due to the family's access to technology. Additionally, we have concerns with the implementation of such an online registration. Currently, parents and guardians come to the school to register a child, and they must provide proof of residency, and other required information. Also, in-person registration provides parents and guardians with the opportunity to meet school, staff, and personnel and begin building critical relationships. We feel that decision-making authority for registration procedures and processes should remain at the local level. We recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
I just had a question. This is not mandating that registration is only done online, correct? Or
No,
would it?
the bill would require all school systems to offer the opportunity for in-person and online.
So wouldn't that potentially give more people the chance to register their children for pre-K?
There is the potential. One of the issues that was raised is that certainly our pre-K, publicly funded pre-K program is to provide pre-K opportunities to low-income students and families. However, if you have a family that is eligible under those requirements that may not have access to technology, and let's say, there's a limitation of how many students are selected at a school, and let's say I have a pre-K student, I have access, although my student doesn't meet the requirements of being economically disadvantaged, we have concerns that that would displace some economically disadvantaged children for which the program was established if they come, after the deadlines, or even if you have two families that are similarly situated economically, there are concerns that children would be displaced from their school that they originally would go to and would then have to go to another school, because we would have to provide the pre-K education, but if slots are filled up at their current school, they may have to be moved. They would have to be moved to another location, which could be complicating for the family.
Are we filling slots as applications come in? Application comes in, check, you're in? Or are we holding the pot until a certain date?
Yeah.
And then looking at the economic status of the family?
So we're filling them as they qualify.
As they qualify
In each of the categories, we're filling those, and then we go to a wait list in those schools. And part of our concern is not so much the registering online, it's that administratively the bill is not, has no real meat to it, and we're not really sure how administratively how we're going to be able to make this work. Like creating a wait list, you have to have a date and time stamp, and that's done at the local school as somebody comes in and registers. And if we have people registering in person at the same time and registering online, we're going to have a conflict with how we're going to be able to develop the appropriate wait list and who was there first and who was not as they're registering. We also have some real concerns, as Jeanette pointed out, with families not actually coming into the school to register and meet with the principal and meet with the staff as they're going through the registration process, and we have to verify a lease or a mortgage and that they are part of the county system, as opposed to everything being submitted online. And we don't know, is that something they have to bring in later? The bill doesn't say that. Is that something they have to scan those documents and send them in with their online registration? It doesn't say that. And so we just have so many questions that we don't believe that we can support it at this time.
Mrs. Sasso.
With the modern technology, what I'm looking at is basically, and I understand that the paperwork is not there, but people can just register. It doesn't mean that they're going to be accepted. And then you can have a general meeting where they bring in all their paperwork, or their paperwork is due, or they will get an appointment by such and such a date. Because some of these parents just work, 2 or 3 jobs or whatever it is, especially the economically disadvantaged. And honestly, everybody has a little telephone that you can just text and register online, even if it's just sending your name and your child. But then you will have to come to the location, once you're told, okay, your child is accepted, or bring in the paperwork and at a later date. But just to use it to get, there are 30 kids out there that would like to come.
Yes, ma'am, and you bring up a wonderful suggestion, absolutely, but the bill we don't know if that was the intent and how that would work. And in your scenario, Ms. Sasso, does that mean that the person that just sent their name in,
Yes.
and they're going to come in later with the paperwork, do I put them at the head of the list?
No, it
Versus
doesn't mean
somebody
that they
that comes in with the
qualify.
paperwork on that day or submits everything at one time, right? Does that give them a placeholder? You bring up a great suggestion.
Yes.
I just don't know, and the bill does not give us that opportunity to say whether that was the intent. And we have so many questions like that, that again, we're not able to.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as a list so that basically the school system will know how many people are out there that basically would be qualified for a pre-K program.
They don't know they're qualified.
We don't know.
If it's just a name.
Well, but if they're not qualified, but they would have then to come in and bring the paperwork. But we would know there's 30, there's 40, beforehand, so they could just. It's just that our system nowadays, everything is done by text, email, so you can send in your name. It doesn't mean you're accepted. It doesn't mean, but basically it would give the school system an idea, by this day, how many people we would have for a pre-K program.
And with the same phone, they can take a picture of their lease and
Yes.
send it.
Yeah, but it's just the availability and the immediate, okay, we are gonna have 30 pre-K, we're gonna have 100 pre-K. Do we have space for them? And then the decision can be made economically once all the papers are in. Just to
Mrs.
get a number.
Mrs. Hummer.
We don't currently have online registration for any students, do we? Not just pre-K. To register, you have to come in person to a school and bring your documents and see everything. So that is across the board for all of our students at this time. And with pre-K, it may be something in the future that we could do, but currently the way it is, because we do a priority listing based on income and all of those things, without the appropriate paperwork, we would have no idea of who would. If they just do online, we wouldn't be able to verify and do all those things. And I agree, I think it's so important for parents to come to the school and meet the staff, and the staff can explain things to them and answer, and that's a valuable thing, especially for pre-K who are just coming in. So I think there's potential maybe in the future that we can do more of this online, but I agree that this is not at this point. There's too many other factors.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you, Madam President. I again don't know the intent of the sponsor, but my concern, and I don't want to repeat what's already been said by some others in the interest of time, but I love the last line on this. Decision-making authority for registration procedures and processes should remain at the local level. Mm-hmm. I think we ought to head in this direction, but it ought to be on our terms when we're ready and when we have the mechanics to do some of that extra assurance that someone is indeed a county resident in the district or feeder system in which they say they live. I just don't like these state mandates. And, when the state, mandates to the counties or the LEAs, or the federal government then comes in and gives an edict to the states and the LEAs, it's just an overburden. And for that reason, while I think the intentions are good, I just don't want that additional restriction placed on us. I think we ought to do this when we're ready.
I understand that, but I feel like this particular population, economically disadvantaged, if we can get more of these students into our school by opening up online registration for parents who are working 2 or 3 jobs and can't get to the school building very easily, that, obviously this isn't happening around the state, or we wouldn't need a state mandate. That's just my opinion. Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing?
Public comment. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
So, as a former registrar at a high school and also as a former principal secretary at an elementary school, when parents and families come in to register, we verify that the person who's registering is the legal parent and guardian. We also check birth certificates. So doing it online would be pretty difficult to verify that the person who is signing them up is the, in fact, legal parent or guardian. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of opposing this legislation? And I'm going to say no. So 6-1.
The next bill, House Bill 1171, Public School Employees Required Training on Retirement Benefits. This bill would require MSDE to establish a training program for public school employees regarding available retirement benefits. This training would have to be offered at least once a year, and public school employees would have to attend the training each year. We feel that this bill is an unfunded mandate that would likely be passed on to local school systems in order to ensure that employees comply with its requirements. Currently, employees have online access to information regarding the retirement system and supplemental programs. This information is also available via the State Retirement Agency and through communications with their local school systems HR department. House Bill 1171 also raises questions concerning when employees would complete the required training and whether local school systems would be required to pay employees to attend. Such an arrangement would result in additional expense for the school system, which we cannot absorb at this time given the current fiscal realities. We recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
So move.
Second.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this legislation? Motion passes 7-0-0.
Can I make just a comment on that?
Sure.
The only comment I would like to make is basically, we are all adults, and if somebody has worked in the school system and can't read what their benefits are, we are in deep trouble.
The next bills, House Bill 1460 and Senate Bill 962, Labor and Employment, Payment of Minimum Wage Required, Fight for 15. These bills would increase the state minimum wage rate with a goal of $15 an hour, at which time the increase would be tied to the annual growth of the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers for the Washington-Baltimore metropolitan area. The Board of Revenue estimates would be required to conduct an analysis of the economy of the state, and the governor would be authorized to temporarily suspend a minimum wage rate increase for a 12-month period if the Board of Revenue estimates determines that this is necessary. So the bill is broken down into two sections. It deals with employers with 26 and over employees and 25 and under. Ultimately, they both will reach $15 an hour. It's just those employers who have 25 or less would do it at a slower pace, whereas we would be at the faster pace. So the section that would apply to Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the increase would start at $12 an hour on July 1st, 2019, and the minimum wage would increase $1 an hour each year thereafter until the minimum wage reaches $15 an hour beginning July 1st, 2022. This proposed legislation would have a significant impact on AACPS in the midst of fiscally challenging times for the school system. We currently have approximately 700 employees who earn less than the wage that would be ultimately required under these bills. And we recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
So move.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing the bill? Opposed? Motion passes 6-1.
The next bill, House Bill 1522, needs assessment for student school-based behavioral health counseling services throughout the year. This bill would require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and MSDE to conduct a needs assessment for student school-based behavioral health counseling services throughout the school year. The assessment would have to contain information regarding the behavioral health needs of each school district and recommendations for removing obstacles to the provision of these services to students with behavioral health needs. We feel that this bill is timely as we are currently experiencing an ongoing increase in the number of students in need of mental and behavioral health supports, and developing a mechanism to track students exhibiting the need for these supports. AACPS believes that the first step to gaining additional supports for our students is to identify the need for such supports. We therefore recommend that the board support this legislation.
So move.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of supporting this bill? Motion passes 7-0-0.
The next bill, Senate Bill 625, Public Schools and Shelters, Homeless Girls and Women, Feminine Hygiene Products. This bill would require each county board of education to make available to homeless female students a sufficient supply of feminine hygiene products. Currently, the school nursing program in place at AACPS is funding through Anne Arundel County Department of Health, and the provision of health needs falls under the auspices of the county. Currently, feminine hygiene products are available for students in need in the school health rooms. However, the section in this bill that would require a school to provide a free supply of feminine hygiene products sufficient to meet the needs of students is overly broad. It is also unclear whether a school would be required to provide feminine hygiene products for the school, home, holidays, and summer vacation, or any other time. The lack of clarity in the bill would make it difficult for a school to ensure compliance. We recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
So move.
Second.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this legislation? Motion passes 7-0.
The next bill is Senate Bill 864, Education, Overdose on Public School Premises, Substance Abuse Treatment Programs. This bill would require a school official to file with a juvenile court a petition alleging a child has overdosed on public school premises in violation of current state regulations prohibiting this. It would also require juvenile court to order a child who has overdosed on public school premises to enter a state-certified substance abuse treatment program. This bill raises many questions and many concerns. The bill references the responsibility of public school officials to file a petition with the juvenile court, but Anne Arundel County Public School health rooms are staffed by the County Department of Health personnel and not school system staff. It would be difficult for a public school official to make such a determination. We feel that a medical institution would make this determination, would be best to do so. Unless a medical institution notifies the school that an overdose has been confirmed, the school system would not be in a position to verify such an occurrence. In addition, current laws protecting health information may make it impossible for a medical institution to notify a school or a school official in order for that school official to make the report, which would be required under this bill. Also, the reference to a child overdosing on public school premises is problematic because other entities and agencies, such as recs and parks, Boy Scouts, churches, etc., utilize AACPS school buildings and facilities. We would have no way of knowing if a child overdosed on our premises when a building or facility is being used by other community partners. We recommend that the board oppose this legislation.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0. And then we have one more late addition.
Yes, we wanted to provide an update on what's been happening with the Anne Arundel County delegation and the school board bills that they have been considering this session. As you know, there are 3 competing bills in the House delegation relating to the Anne Arundel County Board of Education, and one of the bills would have been an all-elected school board. A second bill would have mostly elect one appointment and the remaining elected, and then the third one was a hybrid. Today, Bob and I actually attended the Anne Arundel County delegation this morning before the board meeting as they were taking up the bills. The Education Subcommittee for the delegation voted out House Bill 716, which is Delegate Pam Beidel's bill, calling for a fully elected school board. So that was the bill that was being considered this morning. They have amended the bill to address some concerns. One of the main amendments to the bill was removing a 9th at-large school board member. So the bill, as amended currently, would be 7 elected school board members, 1 student member. This morning, there were several amendments that were proposed to be placed on the bill. A couple of the amendments directly would affect CRASC and how it operates, and the student member of the board. Similar amendments were considered at a previous education subcommittee meeting, but they were rejected. Specifically, the amendments that were raised this morning, Delegate McMillan has an amendment that would, that would essentially limit the voting rights of the student member of the board to mirror the Prince George's County student member of the board. The student member of the board would be prohibited from voting on capital and operating budgets, school closings, reopenings, and boundaries, collective bargaining decisions, student disciplinary matters, teacher and administrator disciplinary matters as provided under the current law, and other personal matters. The amendment would further states that an affirmative vote of the majority of the non-student members of the board would essentially determine whether a matter relates to something the student board member could not vote or could vote on. Additionally, when the amendment states that when a student member is voting, the board would need 5 votes for something to pass, and when the student member is not voting, it would need 4 votes to pass. Second amendment.
So Delegate Howard had a similar amendment in the Education Subcommittee, which I think you have both those amendments before you. And so if it's your preference, we would ask you to oppose both of these amendments. Delegate Howard's amendment technically is still active because Delegate Saab has not withdrawn House Bill 555 yet, even though they seem to be focused on 716.
Mrs. Birch.
I move that we oppose both of these amendments or any other amendment that may limit the student board members' voting rights.
So moved.
Is there any public comment on that?
Open meetings limit? That wasn't in here.
That was his
So we'll deal with,
subcommittee
so we'll deal with the 8,000 and anything mentioned.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Scott Howarth. I'm the president of the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils. As you know, the student board member is the backbone of our student leadership program. Our students do understand the importance of our vote, and I think Carolyn can attest to that. We set the standards nationwide. We are the only student board member that we know of in the nation that has full voting rights. We are setting the standard. Around the state, we've seen in recent years that there have been other counties that have received increased student voting rights. We've seen in Montgomery County, there was a second student board member added in, I think, Talbot County last year, and there's a Frederick County bill going through the legislature this year. The amendment to take away the voting rights of, or limit the voting rights of our student is a step back, big step back. I think, again, we're setting the example. People around us should be striving to have full voting rights for their students because of how important our student voice is, because we are in the schools. So we trust that you guys will vote to oppose this amendment. We also appreciate your support in our endeavors, and this experience for us has been very eye-opening. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sasso?
Yes, is there any reason why these 2 delegates have decided to meddle into what the school board is doing?
We've not had a conversation with either one of them. Delegate McMillan mentioned this morning in discussion of his amendment in particular, essentially that children aren't capable of making decisions about a $1 billion budget. I would summarize it that way.
Can he be informed that these are children that are basically seniors that will be our future adults?
Ms. Williams?
I would just like to thank CRASP, number one, for continuing to be in the forefront of this and standing in front of this and making sure that this does not happen. And I would like to say, speaking as the current student board member, I take this job, I take this role very seriously. And I know that the members prior to me have done the same thing. And this is something that we have an old student board member who is sitting on this board right now as a current board member, how vital was that position to you? Mr. Dillon, if you would mind answering just really quickly. How vital was the student board member position to you?
I was comfortable leaning back. Thank you, Ms. Williams. I've stayed quiet for a couple of reasons publicly because of the larger bills that have surfaced, and I found it inappropriate for me to say anything. But on this amendment, or on these amendments specifically, I clearly echo what's been said, and I have got to really applaud you, Ms. Williams. Also applaud your colleagues in Crask for their activism over the last few weeks especially. And Mr. Howarth, you're to be commended for all that you do. This position meant so much to me. You know, as a 17-year-old rising senior coming here for my first meeting in I hate dating myself, the summer of '94. I've got to say, I never once, as the student member, felt that I was incapable of voting on anything that's come before this board. And I was friends with some of the student members, at least in the few preceding years during my time, and then friends with some in the subsequent years, the few subsequent years to me. During my time in the House of Delegates, I also had a chance to know and work with not just the full board, but student members during that time. And I can also attest to not just the current student board member, but her predecessor, Mr. Horskamp, who I thought was phenomenal as well. You know, no offense to some of my adult colleagues, but there have been times when the student board members have been more or better versed and more educated on the issues than we have, because they bring a perspective not just out here, but in the caucus room when we're voting on more sensitive topics that helps us to make better and more informed decisions. You know, so for that reason, I do oppose these amendments. I really, again, want to thank Ms. Williams for being just a strong voice, not just as it relates to the legislation, but also just on really continuing to raise the bar for all those who will follow you in your seat. And again, you know, Mr. Howarth and the leadership team at Crask, thank you for doing what you're doing. You know, the bar's been moving in other LEAs toward what we are and what we have and what we've had since 1974. I think I was the 21st. You know, 1974 to 1994, and here we are now. This is not the time to be moving the dial back, especially when others are moving in our direction. So thank you for that.
Ms. Sasso.
Yes, I think just by the mention of Mr. Delegate McMillan stating the fact that children, he seems not to take into consideration that some of these quote-unquote children are high school seniors that are already adults with the right to vote. So basically, I don't think he is representing our constituents who will be voting for him. So maybe he should basically go back and ask, out of all our students who have represented us in the past, how many of them are already adults with the right to vote? We are not putting elementary school children to sit up here for us.
Mrs. Nally?
Well, I have been served on this board, as you know. I'm the senior member. Is that a title now? But during this time, the student board members, and I want to echo my my fellow board members have provided invaluable information both here and in closed session. They have given us a perspective from the students' voice, and many times we've gone, really? And we see a different side. I also know these student board members meet regularly with Dr. Arlotto, just as we do. They seek to understand exactly what they're voting on. They get the packet just like we do. We all study our packet. We all look, and if they don't understand, then they seek for understanding. They call Dr. Arlotto. He is available to them, as his staff, to answer questions. Oftentimes these kids, I'm not sure Delegate McMillan and I'm not sure they've sat down with these students who take unbelievable courses, AP courses, unbelievable load, and they're absolutely prepared because they go through the CRASC process and they are prepared to make these decisions. Any effort to marginalize, and I call it that, to marginalize the students is just reprehensible to me. As I've gone to national school board meetings, I've seen the student school board members who are not they feel like they are excluded from all the important things. They're just like a figurehead. They have a different attitude. They don't feel like they're really valued. I think our student board members know they're valued. They know that when they speak, we're listening, and we're listening to their perspective. We also know that they're taking their vote seriously. I'm not sure that these folks have, Delegate McMillan and Howard, have even sat down with student board members and listened to the preparation and the things that they do to be prepared. I think they're better prepared than these guys making this bid. I mean, they haven't prepared themselves at all, in my opinion. And that's my opinion. So with that, I guess you see how I feel.
Mrs. Hummer.
Ditto.
And ditto. All those in favor of opposing these amendments and any others that might come in to limit the student board member. Okay, motion passes 7-0-0.
Another amendment that will be, so these amendments will be considered at the delegation meeting on Friday morning, but they were discussed today. Another amendment that was discussed is an amendment from Delegate Beiro. Her amendment would increase the scholarship granted to the student member of the board from $6,000 to $8,000, and so we recommend that you support this amendment.
That would align with the increases for the other members that stipulated in her bill.
Second.
Right.
Correct.
Board member.
Correct.
Yes.
That's correct. Yes.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of supporting the amendment?
Hurrah.
Right. Motion passes 7-0-0. Mrs. Birch?
So, I haven't actually seen the text of the bill, but from what I understand, I mean, I guess maybe I've seen it at one point, the proposal has all board members being elected at the same time in the future.
Eventually.
Eventually.
Yes.
Beginning in 2024.
2024.
Okay, and again, I have no horse in this game, none whatsoever. But having been on this board for 9 years and knowing that we only had, 1 or 2 board members new each year at the most, and I find that very concerning as a member of this board, and knowing that for the good work that this board does, there needs to be some kind of continuity in the membership of a board. And I don't know of any other school board in this state that could possibly have a complete turnover in 1 year. I actually don't know of any board at all, public or private. I mean, maybe there is one out there somewhere that does not have staggered terms in some way. And that very much concerns me. Again, I don't know the politics behind, I don't know anything. All I know is that this board would not function well with complete turnover. This is not separation of powers. There's no council and executive. We're not two separate branches. We're a board that hires a superintendent. The people are already concerned that the superintendent's in charge of us. You want to be worried about a superintendent that's in charge of a board? Put 7 and 8 brand new board members in here with a superintendent who's already here. Who do you think is going to be in charge? It's not going to be the board, because they won't know what's going on. I mean, I don't think that's the way it is. I think one way to prevent that is to have continuity, not have turnover at the same time. I would like to propose, and I don't have the wording because, again, I don't have the bill in front of me. And this is not saying there should be an elected board. There should not be an elected board. This is something that I value for the future of this board that I won't be on because my term ends next year. I value for the future of this board that we recommend an amendment that the terms be staggered, that every 2 years, 3 and then 4 be chosen, however they are chosen.
I absolutely agree.
Is that a second?
I second. I'm sorry.
Is there any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Any public comment? All those in favor of that amendment? Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Motion passes 6-1.
Can I just say, just
0-1.
for the record, so everybody who is clear, and anybody watching, the positions you have taken are on these amendments, not on the bills in their entirety. So I just want to make that clear.
And just one final amendment that we understand will likely be coming back on Friday at the delegation meeting. Delegate Howard proposed amendments to the Education Subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, which would make CRASC fall under Maryland's Open Meetings Act and PIA law, Public Information Law. And those were rejected by the Education Subcommittee. However, he raised them again today at delegation and indicated that he intends to bring them back for consideration to the full delegation on Friday. So we have received, we've spoken to Mr. Bennett,
right.
And we've also looked at the AG's office, on our open meetings laws, and CRASC doesn't meet the definition of an entity that would fall under open meetings or the Public Information Act. And so we recommend, we have concerns also with violation of FERPA with regards to privacy concerns. Once if they fall under open meetings, there's opportunity for folks to videotape or audio tape, and we would need parental consent. So we have concerns that this kind of opens a Pandora's box of issues for our students on many levels. And so we recommend that the board also oppose such amendments.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you again, Madam President. Do you know, has an AG opinion been sought by anyone in the delegation?
Delegate Howard indicated today that he would have one by the end of the day. As the meeting was going on, he said he was texting back and forth with an assistant AG.
So his opinion that he's seeking is whether CRASC would qualify or fall under the auspices of
the Open Meetings Act, right?
The Open Meetings Act, but we own FERPA, and so my concern. Certainly, I respect an AG opinion. I think I know how that's going to come out, but at least I hope. But my concern is if we've got students attending an event and parents are not giving a third-party approval to record, take pictures, whatever the case may be, the school system is then going to be held accountable and would be in violation of protecting FERPA. Is that your interpretation of that?
Yes, and in speaking with Mr. Bennett, the same thing. That very discussion took place at the Education Subcommittee last week and took place very briefly again this morning, and Delegate Howard indicated that the opinion he was getting would address that issue.
As well?
So,
okay.
We'll get a copy of it, obviously, once he gets it.
Thank you.
Ms. Sasso?
Yes, is there a reason or is there an underlining reason why this delegate and Macmillan are basically delving so deep into the education system when there is a board? In your opinion?
Yeah, you would have, I wouldn't go there. You would have to ask them, in all honesty.
Okay. Maybe I should ask the newspaper to put that in the article that they're going to write, if they could basically let the board know.
Is there any public comment on this item? Yeah, All right, all those in favor of opposing? The
CRAS.
Open meetings.
Public information.
Motion passes 7-0-0. Mrs. Birch?
I have one more amendment to any legislation about the school board that I would like to recommend. I would like, currently, our elections, our retention elections are county-wide, even though we represent specific districts. Like, I'm the District 32 representative, but I am voted on county-wide. And I think that that serves our students well, because I am responsible to everyone in this county, not just the representatives of District 32. I would recommend that this school board advocates that whatever decision is made about the future of this school board, that votes are taken countywide, even when someone just represents a specific district, so that the integrity of the school board remains intact and that all members are still responsible to the entire county and not specific areas of the county.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting future amendments for the voting? Opposed? Abstain? All right. Motion passes 6-0-1.
That's all I have for you
legislation
today.
for the day?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next item and last item is a review item, 6.01, award of contracts. Are there any board questions or comments? Mrs. Hummer?
The contract for the Maryland Emergency Management Agency shelter requirement at Northeast High School, is this something that is mandated by the state? And are we paying for this out of our funds, or is this because it's a designated shelter? Is the state paying for what's needed to be done for this shelter?
For the record, Alex Checkno, Chief Operating Officer. We partner with the county government's Office of Emergency Preparedness. They identify emergency sheltering, the emergency plans throughout the county. We are part of that in that we're a hosting site for them. So this would upgrade the electrical system at Northeast so that it was compatible with the mobile trailer that the county government, the Emergency Preparedness Department has. The project would be paid by capital funds, and it would be county capital.
So not out of our capital budget, but out of the county.
No, ma'am. It would be out of the Board of Ed's capital budget, but it's county funding. So Anne Arundel County participates in the Maryland emergency preparedness process. We as a locality have our own plan, so it's sort of a hierarchy. We are a player, a participant in them because honestly, we're fortunate enough to have large buildings that can shelter individuals in a power outage, adverse weather condition, et cetera. And we have done so as long as I can possibly remember here. So we, again, want to make sure that our facilities can support our part that we play here, and that our facilities align with the requirements of the county government. The county government is, in fact, paying through the capital budget. So it's county dollars coming into the CIP. But because it's on our property, obviously, we are going to direct the work to make sure that it's done properly and it does not in any other way adversely impact the facility that we have at Northeast High School.
So our capital budget has a line item for emergency, for upgrades for the emergency shelters. Is that where it comes out of?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I just vote on those?
No, review
Oh.
item. Just have I have 4 announcements before we go back into closed session. The first is that earlier this year, this board directed Dr. Arlato to report back in March on any efficiencies that have been found to date as a result of the pilot testing of the bus routing software, especially as it relates to dismissing some of our late ending schools a little bit earlier. We had hoped to have that presentation on March 15th, but because some of the appropriate staff aren't able to be here and a couple of our board members will be absent, we've decided to push that presentation to April 5th. So we just wanted to let everybody know.
It's okay, I won't be here either. Carolyn's laughing at me.
That would be Patty and Maria, who cannot be here. The next Board Budget Committee meeting is Wednesday, March 15th at 4:30 p.m. And the next Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, March 15th at 7 p.m. And the next Board Policy Committee meeting is Wednesday, March 29th at 1 p.m. Mrs. Hummer.
Yes, I move that we go into closed session to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to negotiations.
So move.
All those in favor? All right, this portion of the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.